Welcome to Guns, Gear, and Guns with Gary Gunderson. I am Gary Gunderson. The ATF proposed a rule following up on the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act and an executive order by Joe Biden to essentially get as close to universal background checks as they can without passing a law explicitly requiring it. I will go through the rule in this video, covering the ins and outs, why it is stupid, and more importantly, where to comment on the rule so we can maybe influence it. Now, the rule is over 100 pages, so I won't try to go through every little point, but I will cover quite a bit because it is just so stupid. The rule has several points, but the main one is that in the Bipartisan Idiot Act, they broadened the definition of what it means to be, quote-unquote, engaged in the business of buying and selling firearms, which would require a federal firearms license. The previous definition was, with the principal objective of livelihood and profit, and is now predominantly to earn a profit, which, admittedly to the rule's credit, is a vague statement, which gave the ATF all the reason they needed to go in and define something in a law Congress just passed. The bureaucracy decides that our political elite who write the laws don't write it clear enough, so they are going to go ahead and define what they just said. In reality, it doesn't really change anything, but they are putting this out there in great detail to discourage people from selling firearms face-to-face out of fear they will be prosecuted for gun crime.
Right to jail, right away.
The real objective is to discourage personal gun sales as much as possible so that they can achieve near universal background checks. As you will see as this video goes on, it doesn't change much and is basically the same as it has been due to previous court rulings, just with more detail laid out on why they may decide to prosecute you. The rule also defines personal collection to clarify when you are not engaged in the business, but as you will see, these definitions are all screwy. It also tries to shut down what is apparently called a fire sale loophole that I had never heard of, where if you are an FFL and shut down and you don't sell all of your in-stock firearms, but transfer them into your personal collection, you have to wait 1 year before selling any of those firearms, or they say you are trying to just be a dealer without having a license.
Believe it or not, jail.
Finally, the rule clarifies that if a license holder transfers a firearm to another license holder, they both need to record it in their books and not use 4473's, the general gun transfer form. The rule goes through the whole history up to this point, including that the Gun Control Act defined dealers as engaging in the business, but did not define what that meant. They considered having a number of firearms sold as a threshold, but then decided against it. Later, a definition was added, which was the livelihood and profit definition, which has been in place ever since. It also pointed out that this excluded a person who makes occasional sales, exchanges, or purchases of firearms for the enhancement of a personal collection or for a hobby, or who sells all or part of his personal collection of firearms. It also further defined the livelihood definition as meaning the intent underlying the sale or disposition of firearms is predominantly one of obtaining livelihood and pecuniary gain as opposed to other intents. Over time, the courts began including other factors in these determinations, such as quantity and frequency of sales, location of sales, conditions under which sales occurred, defendant's behavior before, during, and after sales, prices charged, characteristics of weapons sold, and the intent of the seller at the time, with the Bipartisan Act, engaged in business now means a person who devotes time, attention, and labor to dealing in firearms as a regular course of trade or business to predominantly earn a profit through the repetitive purchase and resale of firearms. It says that to predominantly earn a profit means they have a predominant intent of pecuniary gain as opposed to other intents such as improving or liquidating a personal firearms collection. I will admit on the surface that seems reasonable. However, as they get into further detail, you will see that it is anything but and doesn't really change anything. As stated in the rule, even a single transaction by someone has been prosecuted even before this new definition because the guy indicated he was willing to buy and sell other firearms too. It even says you don't need any sales at all to violate this law if the circumstances are right. Just saying to someone that you would be willing to buy their firearm because you plan to resell it later would make you guilty without even completing the transaction. That's the real reason the ATF said they did not want to make the rule based on a number of sales, which seems like a more reasonable standard and solid demarcation on what is and is not being engaged in the business. So it goes into more detail on circumstances that will make the ATF presume you are engaged in the business of dealing firearms. The first one I've already talked about, offers firearms for sale and represents a willingness to potential buyers to purchase and sell additional firearms. Let's say you have a table at a gun show and someone comes up with a firearm and asks if you are interested in buying it. If you say yes, and then if they ask, well, are you going to try to sell it for more? And say, well, maybe, that's probably illegal now. The next item spends more money or equivalent on purchases of firearms for the purpose of resale than the person's reported taxable gross income during the applicable period of time. This one is odd because, as I read it, purchase anything with the purchase of resale is already illegal, so I don't get why they call this one out. This third one seems okay in regards to current laws. You can't purchase with the purpose of resale through sham businesses, straw purchasers, or dealing in firearms that are obviously illegal, such as unregistered machine guns or stolen firearms. 4 is terrible. The first part, repeatedly sells within 30 days of purchase, fine. They even have a rebuttal later that if it's because you don't like it and then purchase something else, that's okay. But B and C, saying you are presumed to be engaging in business if you sell firearms that are new or like new in their original packaging or are part of the same or similar kind, including down to type, so rifles. What? What is this talk of a personal collection being exempt when they have this in here? Do you know people who collect firearms? I know people who just buy AR-15s. So if they try to sell part of their collection and have 4 AR-15s for sale, is that suddenly being engaged in the business? And the like new condition or original packaging? Are you joking? Have you never heard of safe queens? There are entire collector circles who do not fire their guns and treat like new firearms as something that cannot be shot. And yes, having the original packaging increases the value. How can that not be part of a personal collection? Have you met gun nerds? They are still nerds. I should know, I'm one. I have some newer guns, and the ones that came with original boxes, I kept. So now if I sell it with the box, am I suddenly engaging in business? 5, if you had a license and then try to sell firearms that you did not transfer into your personal collection, yeah, whatever. And that's obviously was illegal already. Also, if you had a license and sell firearms you transferred into your personal collection less than a year later, which they also cover again separately later in this rule. I swear this rule repeats itself worse than our stuttering president. So the ATF says any one or combination of the above circumstances gives rise to a presumption, not suspicion, But presumption, they assume you are guilty if you do any of that, which, as you have seen, is a ridiculous and draconian set of parameters. It does specifically point out that you are not engaged in the business. I swear they say that so many times in this dumb rule.
Personal file, 69, offense. He was giving them the business.
If you give them as gifts or occasionally sell firearms only to obtain more valuable, desirable, or useful firearms for their personal collection or hobby. Oh, that's good. Oh, wait, unless their conduct also demonstrates a predominant intent to earn a profit. So yeah, the first part there means nothing. Because, of course, if you sell a firearm, you want the most money you can get out of it. We are not communists. Or if you just want to sell some firearms because you need money. It also goes into more detail on some of these points, such as, yes, if you are committing NFA crimes, they can also charge you for not having a license to sell the already illegal machine gun. Fine. Okay. Side note, the rule does mention that this rule clarifies that you are required to have a license to deal firearms even when the method of payment is unlawful, such as illicit drugs or performing illegal acts for the firearms. So if somebody says they will give you a bag of cocaine for a gun, they want you to have a license and do the 4473 because it's a distinct additional crime otherwise. Wow, thanks for the clarification. Anyways, it explains their reasoning behind the fourth point, that they presume if you sell the same type of firearm or with original packaging, they presume you are guilty because individuals who are bona fide collectors are less likely to amass firearms of the same kind and type. Which is stupid. You can collect anything and have an interest in any aspect of firearms. There's a thing called pattern collecting, where you only collect one type, make, model of firearms, wanting every year, every factory, every different marking, etc. So your entire collection is one firearm over and over. And that you can make the most money by selling particular makes and models? Yes, but that also means people probably collect those makes and models, which is one of the reasons they are more expensive. And yes, like new firearms, do command more money, just like everything ever when it is new. Yes, things in like new condition cost more than things that are old and broken. Wow, what an amazing discovery. It does offer a rebuttal that a collector occasionally sells one specific kind and type of curio or relic firearm to trade up and enhance a personal collection. True, but people can collect things that are not listed as curios and relics. Glocks are collected by people, particularly first gens, but even modern firearms can be collected or collectibles, even if they aren't old enough to be C&Rs. That does not mean they aren't collectible. This is an absurd standard. After all this, the rule does define personal collection as personal firearms that a person accumulates for study, comparison, exhibition, or for a hobby, which is fine, but obviously given the prior presumptions, is very limited in scope. Going back to the point that you don't actually have to sell a firearm to violate the law about selling firearms without a license, it specifically says that even though the definition in the recently passed law says predominantly to earn a profit, it is not required that the government prove the defendant actually profited. So what's the point of any definition? If it's to make a profit but you don't actually have to profit, great. I'm glad they made this rule. They do go into more detail about trying to make a profit, and it's as backwards as the rest of it. So this includes when the person advertises, markets, or otherwise promotes a firearms business, which isn't too bad until you get the parentheses. So this includes advertising or posting firearms for sale, including on any website, establishing a website for selling firearms, making business cards, or tagging firearms with sale prices. I'm sorry, you can't advertise firearms for sale or put sale tags on them? How are you supposed to sell them? Just psychically will it out into the ether? And yes, I know it says as a firearms business, but this section of the rule is defining what it means to have intent to predominantly earn a profit. And the rule says that to be engaged in the business, you have to be predominantly intending to earn a profit. So how can you define a firearms business 2 levels deep beneath what it means to be engaged in the business? It's an endless loop. How do you violate the law? Well, you see, you engaged in the business of selling firearms. Oh, okay, what does that mean? Well, you have to predominantly do it to earn a profit. Well, what do you mean by predominantly? Well, you are doing it predominantly if you have a firearms business. And they reference a court case of someone posting 192 gun ads on a website. So either he had a massive collection, or yeah, this guy was violating the law and acting as a dealer. That's why it's dumb not to have a numerical threshold. I can see an argument that 192 sales makes someone a dealer, but they're saying you can post 1 and be in violation, which is a huge difference. The second point indicating it is primarily for a profit. Hoo boy. Purchasing, renting, or otherwise securing permanent or temporary space to display firearms offered for sale, including at a business or gun show. So see, here's the key of the whole thing. They say that it is presumed you need to have a license to have a table at the gun show. They want to shut down private sales at gun shows. That's all this is. Complete nonsense. I wonder why someone would have a desire to sell their personal collection at a gun show. Maybe because there are people there interested in buying guns. I mean, the first point says you can't advertise guns for sale, even posting on a website. And the second point is that you can't have a table at a gun show. So it's legal to sell your personal collection. You just can't advertise it or set up a table where people are already gathered to buy firearms. The third point is that if you make any records to calculate profits or losses, that's a violation. Yeah, no one should keep track of how much they paid for something or maintain financial records about anything related to a hobby, especially one that does have large value items such as firearms, because that would be suspicious. You can't have a security system registered to a business or pay for security guard services. Now, again, it says to a business, but this is the section to determine what a business is. In the footnote on this point, it says that various jurisdictions require registering your alarm and paying a permit fee, so they conclude that due to the value of inventory and assets, for-profit businesses are more likely to maintain and pay for these alarms rather than individuals seeking to protect personal property. Notice they dropped the business portion from the footnote. I have a monitored alarm system at my home. It costs me $100 a year, and I'm in an area where I don't have to register it or pay an extra fee. And protecting my personal property is part of the appeal, not exactly out of a normal person's price range. And who says you can't have a valuable personal collection worth protecting in the first place? So that's the main portion of the rule, the one focused on deterring you from having a table at a gun show, or they will presume you are breaking the law. Saying that even one sale where you make money can violate the law because they've never heard of someone selling a gun and trying to make the most money out of it. Going through the rest of the rule points briefly, like I said, there is a section on former license holders selling firearms that were transferred into their personal collections when their license expired and selling them too soon, which I'm not sure is an actual change, and you know what? Fine. Though honestly, why it's suddenly okay after waiting 1 year is dumb to me, but with so many other restrictions they have put in place, I'm sure this is a way to pressure former licensees to just sell to gun shops to keep out of jail. There's the section about when you have an FFL and purchase a firearm, which admittedly I don't quite get. To me, this implies that if you have an FFL and you are at a gun shop and want to buy a firearm for your personal collection specifically, you can't go through normal means. It says you need to identify yourself as a license holder and record it into your FFL book as an acquisition, and they record it in their FFL book. But then you would have to transfer it again into your personal collection when that is what you were wanting to do in the first place. And for some reasons, it says that a 4473 would hamper tracing efforts. But if you have the 4473, it would direct it to who bought it, which is the guy's personal collection, which it would also show if they traced it to that gun shop and then showed that he transferred it then to his personal collection. If it went to an FFL and an FFL, I mean, if that's the case, then why do they have 4473s? Because then you can't trace anything anyway if it is directly to people. Maybe this rule broke me by this point into it. I don't know, because I am lost. Then there's a big analysis section, and they make 2 estimates on the number of FFLs needed based on their new definition. And they used some weird math based on arms list for the first example. They took the private party listings, sampled some of them, seeing that the average seller had 3 listings, and on that basis estimated arms list is 50% of unlicensed sellers online, extrapolating that to offline sales percentage, and decided that only a quarter of that actually is engaging in the business, which brought them to about 25,000 engaging in the business without an FFL. The second estimate they get isn't in as much detail, but comes out to about 330,000 who would require an FFL. So pretty wide margin there. The high end is more than 10 times the low end. Then they do the economic impact, and the one based on arms list, since they averaged 3 listings, says they would estimate the new FFLs would have 0 to 3 sales in an average year. Man, if someone's going through all these hoops and all this bureaucracy, you think they're not going to try and engage in the business more? Just because otherwise, why would you bother? So the government cost of the arms list number for taxpayer dollars is almost $13 million if this rule takes effect. And so what does that mean for the larger number? Now, for some reason, they didn't give a chart on just the governmental cost, but also factor in the costs to all the citizens who get FFLs, such as $200 for the license, the time it takes to fill out paperwork, etc. And the estimate for total cost to the American people getting FFLs personally, and the governmental cost to taxpayers as a whole, over $300 million. More than $250 million.
Billion with a B.
With a B.
Thanks. Real good use of resources. The end of the rule provides some alternatives they considered, such as number of sales threshold, which I think is still the best, publishing additional guidance instead of a regulation, which would also make sense since this really didn't change anything based on prior court rulings, or doing nothing, which, come on, the ATF isn't going to do that. Now, the other important part. It is not published in the Federal Register as the time I am making this video, but it will be soon. And I will post a video update at that point and add the link to the comment in the video and in the video's description. So remember, it is important to comment on this rule. It is not in effect yet and is open for a comment period. Go over some of the points I have made or come up with your own based on what you have seen. And also, while a comment form where you don't have to do any work that's usually put up by GOA, FPC, Second Amendment Foundation, etc., would be better than doing nothing, your own personal comment written by you with your own points in your own words is definitely better than that. It does not have to be super in-depth or elaborate, but in one of the recent rulings on the brace rule, the judges specifically called out the number of comments against the rule and also noted the number of unique comments against it. So it's not just to try and make the ATF and the mindless bureaucracy change its mind. It is also a weapon in the quiver of these firearms rights organizations, when the ATF inevitably ignores all the comments against it and makes it a rule anyway, and the lawsuits come down against them. And look, I have as low respect for the ATF as the next guy, but keep your comments clean and on point. Don't just put in expletives and say dumb things, or they will throw it out and it won't count. And I know we shouldn't have to do this. I know the Second Amendment should be enough on its own, but it isn't. So comment, comment, comment. Start writing it now even if you want, so it's ready when the period opens and it will be on your mind. Read the rule yourself. Maybe there are some salient points I missed or that did not occur to me. Subscribe to the channel so you know when the comment period opens if you don't follow this stuff on your own. You can also share the video so others know what's going on. Like I said, on the surface, the rule does seem reasonable, but once you dig into it, you see its real goals. Anyways, that's the rule. I hope this has helped you see how nefarious it actually is, and if you have made it this far, consider supporting me on Patreon. Reading this idiotic rule takes a good chunk of time, as well as putting the video together, and supporting me can help me make more informative videos like this, or the other fun, less depressing videos I also do, possible. Join our Discord, like the video, and make a comment on the video too if you have good arguments against the rule that I didn't bring up, so others can use that for their comments as well. We need to work together to put forth our best points. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.